Hello, this is Jon Reed. It's now almost into September in the SAP land. That means a whole lot has changed. It seems like the last time we were really hashing out SAP, we were in ASUG annual conference, Sapphire mode. And now it's time to regroup because this is a critical fall for SAP customers for a variety of reasons, whether it's end of maintenance, making sense of business AI. There's a whole bunch of important and interesting events coming up this fall too. So, what are customers to make of all this? Well, I got the right people. I got Geoff Scott and Josh Greenbaum. How we doing?
Good afternoon to both of you. How are you?
And good morning to you, my friend. Thank you.
And good evening to Jon Reed.
Thank you. So, look, I'm sure this is going to be really interesting because we don't know exactly where this is going, but we do have a few things we want to cover. I do want to get into how customers can make the most of the fall events that are coming up. But guys, I want to start with a really simple question. I don't want to have a huge thing on this, but I just want to ask you, what do SAP customers need the most from SAP right now? And you can editorialize a little bit if you want on how well SAP is doing with that. But in general, what do they need right now, Josh? Tell me.
Well, I have a list of about 5 things.
Okay.
So I'm going to not necessarily get too deep into them, but I think definitely SAP customers should be really looking to SAP and saying, how do you help me with business continuity? Because I think that is probably the number one question facing the world today. Quite literally, I've been hearing a lot of complaints about chaos and complexity, and I think that's the big question to SAP is not what's the coolest, newest technology you've got. What is this business AI thing? It's let's talk business. Let's talk the business of business. I'm going to add one. There's a whole bunch of. I've got 3 others. We'll bring them up, but the last one is how do you help me find the right partner to get all this stuff done? I think this is a big gap in the SAP shall we say, innovation world, internal innovation. They've been innovating a lot in terms of how they structure themselves, who's doing what. And I think the last sort of leg of the stool that really needs to get fixed, keep this thing on course is, that was like 3 metaphors mixed all at once, is the partner strategy. Because customers are really struggling, in my opinion, to find the right partner, and they need them for that last mile, 100%.
Were those the 5 things, Josh?
That was I'm going to leave a couple.
Josh is holding a couple of them out, which is great.
I'm holding my fire.
Great because I'm going to circle back to this question later, so we don't have to cover all of it.
We're playing a modified game of poker.
We are.
So, to Josh's point, I'm going to echo his first one, which was he called it continuity, and I'm going to call it how do you operate at uncharted levels of uncertainty. Right. So if everything around the world is up in arms and there's a whole lot of unknowns out there, how does your IT strategy mold around probably some of the most uncertain times that we've been in recent memory, right? And perhaps and we've talked about this in some of the podcasts that we've done together, is right this notion that I need to now have an IT strategy that transcends uncertainty, which I think comes back to some of the other points Josh talked about, which is complexity. If I have a highly complex and brittle enterprise architecture, being able to be nimble in uncertain times is progressively harder. So I think that necessitates some things we heard out of SAP in May in Orlando, which was suite first, AI first, right? And the way that I interpret that, meaning if I can simplify my IT landscapes and my IT architectures, I probably have a better opportunity to leverage all this uncertainty that's coming at us. I also completely agree with Josh, almost unheard of on this podcast. I agree with Josh Greenbaum that the partner ecosystem is also complex and probably more fragmented than ever. And there is no one single partner that can deliver the vast array of services that you probably need. So how do you find the best of the best out there when skills and upskilling are so critical to your enterprise strategy? So I would add those couple things to my list of 2, not 5.
Yes, I think you guys are right in my wheelhouse here as well. And, something that's on my mind is how there are times where it's not any particular vendor's fault, but the world moves very quickly. And then your software is under some pressure in your overall strategy. And I think that's the situation SAP finds itself in now. And it happens sometimes. I mean, this happened many years ago in the BI market when SAP acquired Business Objects, but then immediately we had all these changes in analytics and much more emphasis on self-service and lighter cloud-based tools and stuff like that. Sometimes the market changes. And last night, getting ready for this, I was listening to an ASUG Talks podcast. There's your shameless plug, Geoff.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
It was on supply chain disruptions. And
I listened to the same one. Yeah.
One of the things the guests said is they were talking about black swan events. And now I hate the term future proof. Okay. I just think that's a ridiculous thing to say for a vendor to say that they can future proof your business.
But can't. Yeah, I agree with you.
But I really thought there was a powerful point at the beginning of that podcast that said there were some important black swan events that happened, whether it's like COVID or ports closing or whatever. But now you have to architect your supply chain as if to expect these events.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is the huge distinction that's happening now. And along those lines, you need a much more integrated end-to-end view of your business to do that, both in a operational and analytics capacity, and that means both SAP and non-SAP systems. I think that does put a lot of pressure on SAP. And I would add to that list, that also means making migrations easier, because there's no question that those customers on the latest releases of SAP have a leg up when it comes to more, agile type software. And finally, I will just add that, and I know that Josh doesn't like sort of the discussion of AI for its own sake, but I do think that customers need to be able to articulate what SAP's AI strategy is and how it can help them address some of these problems, because there is pressure from the board and from the exec leadership team to have an AI strategy in the context of your SAP deployment. And if you can't answer that question, you look like a fool. So those are the things that percolated to the top of my list at this point in time.
By the way, I'm the biggest fan of AI here. It's just not large language model based AI.
Then you can't possibly be the biggest fan of AI here if you say, I'm the biggest fan of AI here, and then you proceed to kibosh it.
No, because AI is, we just keep doing this. It's AI is, a good half a dozen different distinct technologies. Only
Indeed.
one of them.
And of course, your answer to that question to leadership can be, part of what you just said, Josh. But the point is you also have to be able to explain the pros and cons of large language models and how they can be used and not used, and why your employees, half of them are using shadow AI tools that are, counter to the safety of your data. You have to be on top of that stuff now as an SAP leader. And so that's the difference between AI and other tools, where you don't necessarily have to do that on blockchain and metaverse and stuff like that, but you have to be able to answer the AI questions.
So, I think it's the AI question gets answered with, unfortunately, probably a cadre of different apps, not a single mega app, right? And it also, I think, has to be answered through the lens of experimentation and refinement and trial and error, which are also things that we as enterprise technicians and IT architects are not very good at. This notion of, hey, let me fiddle with some of this and see what pans out and what doesn't, because not all of the AI stuff is going to work reliably or is going to give you all the answers that you want to see. As a matter of fact, some of the evidence and some of the research we're doing, again, early stages, is some of the smaller, more niche AI applications are having a much more profound effect and impact than trying to kind of, swing for the fences, so to speak, as we wrap up and kind of get into baseball season and move into football season, right? Or, no one's going to throw a 90-yard touchdown pass with AI at the moment. So I think that those all add to a lot of complexity in a time when uncertainty is the reigning champion. which I think makes a lot of this a lot more complicated. And one of the technologies that I do believe has immense promise, and we've all spoken about this previously, is BDC. And really thinking about how do you create a layer of data that can potentially be your launch board for AI-driven apps.
Right. So this is really interesting because when I go back to Sapphire, I felt like we got somewhere with these conversations, but then time kind of elapsed. And now I look
It went
back and
fast.
now I look back and I think some of the interesting themes of Sapphire were not necessarily the news stories. I mean, SAP issued so much news around SAP Sapphire that there was like a book. It was like literally a book.
Literally a book. Yes.
And when I look back, I was trying to challenge myself to think about like what would I want people to be thinking about heading into the fall. One of the things that I think is most notable, SAP didn't issue a press release on this, but if you go on their website, you won't see a whole lot about S/4HANA. And you won't see much naming about that. But what you will see is a lot of stuff around Business Suite, which is a tagline that came up in the past, but is now back. And there's a lot of suite talk at SAP, no pun intended. And suite first, and then I think the most interesting.
I said it first on this podcast.
You did, and then I think the most interesting one is suite as a service. Now, I want to touch on this briefly because I think it is important that SAP is doing this, and I think there's a few reasons for it. One of them is that SAP doesn't want to just be perceived as a ERP provider, and the suite offers a broader sort of footprint around what SAP is doing. I think Josh and I were talking about this week because I'm a bit critical of the suite verbiage just because I feel like right now customers really want these end-to-end views, but not necessarily all the software from the same vendor. I think they have heterogeneous landscapes, as Josh has, tagged them famously, and they want to be able to interoperate, and they would like SAP to do that. And Geoff, BDC, I think, is part, along with the Databricks piece of that, is a significant effort on SAP's part to make it possible for that to happen. So my frustration with the suite thing is I think the messaging makes it seem like SAP wants customers to only buy SAP stuff. But I think SAP has actually made progress in this quest to be more open. So where are we? Is SAP trying to go back to buy everything from us, or is SAP legitimately just not getting the messaging quite right on that?
I think the thing they're not saying loud enough, but they're saying, they're talking with their products, is suite first, but not suite only. And this not suite only is really important when you look at exactly what the Databricks component of BDC is about. If you look at what Signavio and LeanIX and Cloud ALM can do in terms of not just building heterogeneous environments, but monitoring heterogeneous environments in the operational phase of a project. They are not. I think this is actually a real sea change. It's just the slogan is wrong, but the activities are very, very much in line with, we are going to meet you where you are. We want you, dear customer, to look at us as the first among equals. But we are ready. SAP's ready to get down and dirty with some of these non-SAP products. That's what I'm seeing on the ground. What they're saying from the keynote stage still isn't in sync with that necessarily.
Yeah, I come at it from a different perspective, which is, if I'm an enterprise architect or I'm a part of an IT organization and I'm thinking about the uncertainty that's occurring in the landscape in front of me, the only way to battle uncertainty is to have fewer applications. So I don't know that I don't know I completely understand why SAP is talking suite first and whether it's defensive or offensive. And, but from a customer-centric point of view, I think it stands to reason that the less applications I have, the less I have to integrate, assuming that the integration embedded in SAP works. And let's just assume that for a moment. I know that's a dangerous assumption, but the less apps I have and the less integration I have to do, means I can free up time to worry and think about some of the innovation that I need to do. So innovation wins, integration does not. And if I can take my IT resources and deploy them to forward facing AI stuff because we're spending less time keeping the lights on, I think that's net positive. If I can achieve that realistically with SAP, I think that makes sense from an IT CIO perspective.
But I think that ignores reality on the ground. I think it's kind of, to me, it's sort of analogous to, what's the best way to solve your high cholesterol problem? Well, choose your parents wisely is the tagline. Yeah, it'd be really great if we could just step back, we the large enterprise customer, and say, yeah, let's go greenfield with SAP. But the reality is there's not just dozens, but hundreds and thousands of systems out there. You're
Correct. But if we don't start whittling them down, Josh, and start really having honest internal dialogues is why does that customization exist? Right. I do happen to believe,
customization is a different category.
well, you went greenfield. So when I think about greenfield, you're talking about implementing out of the box software.
Suites first. Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, that's a very interesting point. Is greenfield now considered suite first? Because greenfield was considered to be an S4 implementation roadmap.
John, we just talked. You just mentioned this. We're not talking about S4.
I'm now intrigued.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of change going on right now, and including some of the product naming around cloud ERP that gets very confusing.
Yeah.
Now the default is sort of the public edition, and the private is considered another option. It's very complicated, but the gist is that we're moving fast right now. One thing that I think is really interesting that ties into all of this
Very diplomatic answer.
is well, I'm about to not be diplomatic, so.
Okay.
Is the boomerang effect that I referred to with certain phrases that vendors use that end up coming back to bite them, sometimes in good ways. So one of my classics is customer success, where if you're going to start using that term, then we're going to start holding you to that, right? So it ends up kind of having this boomerang of like, oh, what does customer success really mean? Where are we falling down?
Right.
Well, I think the way vendors talk about AI has that too, in the sense that I don't think that tomorrow or the next day every user is going to be interacting with systems via prompts and stuff like that. But it is going to become a way that users interact with these systems, and not just through an AI prompt, but also through things like Microsoft Teams and such. And then it's going to come along and say, "Would you like me to take care of this for you?" And let's say it's onboarding an employee, and you say, "Yes, go do that." Well, the user doesn't want to then hear back, "I'm sorry, but you don't have the licenses to that. I'm sorry, but that involves an integration with another vendor that we don't have in place." That's the problem with these things, is once you say go do this, you want it done. And vendors are in a really interesting spot here, including SAP, because they now have to make sure that that's possible to empower users in those ways. And that means also no toll roads for partners around that stuff. And that's already been an issue for a lot of vendors, including SAP and Salesforce and other big vendors, where partners and third parties are saying, we can't access the data we need to serve our customers. And so, because data is becoming a really, really big deal. And so it's going to be a tricky time for vendors to figure out how to do that in such a way that protects their financial base of operations and their investor relations, but also meets the needs of these new workflows where we just want stuff done. We don't want to hear about this isn't connected or you need a license for this.
Well, I think that's, to me, is the fundamental challenge of AI at its core, which it makes an assumption, John, to your point, that all of that data is available to you in a place and time that you can get to it. And I think your point, well, yeah, thanks, Josh. And even quality. I wasn't even at quality yet, but that's a great counterpoint, right? I can get to the data, and to the extent, again, that I have all these disconnected systems, and some of my processes might be on paper or might be in email or in Teams, trying to get a holistic view of this. And some of these core, really critical processes is a lot harder than it seems on the surface. And I think the reality of many enterprises is they look at it and go, yeah, it doesn't quite work that way, Mr. or Mrs. IT supplier and partner, because you have somewhat of an ivory tower view of this. And this is how it actually works on the ground. And especially when we know, and many of our core SAP customers are heavy manufacturing who have shop floor systems and production floor systems that might be really, really old, that are unlikely to be replaced in the short term because of the amount of time and money it takes. Some of that data just isn't flat out available. And so do you deprecate or turn down the ability for you to make good decisions because the data to make them isn't there? I mean, AI's got a massive, unrelenting appetite for data
You
at
just
an
made my
ever
point for me,
increasing
by
price
the way.
point.
We're back to heterogeneity. We're back to it's got to be a mix of SAP and non-SAP systems because that's the reality.
But every time you mix that in, Josh, don't you then increase your integration problem? Don't you increase all sorts of other wear and tear that actually takes you further away from that nirvana
Well, the
state that
you,
you're
the
trying to
mythical
argue?
you is the problem. There's no you here. It's a they, and versus it's everybody against IT. Trying to make sense of this stuff.
Because if my thoughts over the last couple of months is the only people that are really incentivized to have an enterprise viewpoint is IT. The rest of the organizations are incentivized to have a very, a very sole focus on their functions.
So you guys have really done a great job in this unscripted conversation of getting to where I wanted to get, which is
Oh no, we fell into his trap.
you did.
Josh.
You fell right
Every
in.
time you and I try this, we get thwarted by the, oh, you are exactly where I wanted you to be.
Yeah, you
And
fell
and I have
right
spent-
into it, man.
We
Which
had this
is
whole
Here it comes
script,
down-
Josh.
here
We
comes
worked
the
on this
hammer,
for
okay.
hours. I know.
I'm going to add one more little thing to the mix, which is that the technical architecture behind this really matters, and this is important to the fall event scenarios because there's this fantasy that we're only talking about business outcomes now, and I do like talking about business outcomes. But years ago, I had an argument with an executive running a large ERP company, and we were arguing about multi-tenancy. And the argument, I'm a big advocate of that type of architecture, not necessarily multi-tenancy, but economies of scale that allow you to not fuss about with incredibly complex individual landscapes. And the vendor executive essentially told me, well, we don't care about that because we'll swallow the cost. And I was like, there's no way to hide that cost on the balance sheet. But now it's a bigger problem because it's not just cost, it's delivery of all these services. If you don't have the right architecture and the right platform inside your company to surface the right information to the right people, then I don't care what software you buy, it's not going to work. And so the technical and the business part need a deeper level of fusion, which sets up the fall events because we have a bunch of interesting events this fall that are both, some of them are more business oriented, some of them are more technical, peaking at the end with SAP Tech Ed, virtual, and then on the ground, I think, where is it on the ground in
Louisville.
Yes, there's an the Tech Connect's on the ground in Louisville, but the Tech Ed's on the ground overseas. I
Back
can't
to
remember.
Bangalore.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
But
no.
no,
Tech
it's not
Tech
Bangalore.
Ed is in Berlin.
Berlin, right. So we got
Connect is in Louisville.
Is in Louisville, right. So
That
the
we
point,
know.
But this is, if you're in North America, you go to Louisville because that's the Tech Connect is.
right, but we have a global audience for our podcast, Jeff. So so we're peaking with those events on the technical side, but there's a bunch of other events coming up. So I think we've kind of set the table for why people need to get to these events and have these conversations because the opportunity is real, but the challenges are not things you should try to contend with in isolation from other users. So with that in mind, I'm going to give Jeff a chance for a brief detour into promo. Jeff, on the ASUG side, tell us what events you're looking forward to and why you think they matter to customers this fall.
So there are 4 that are on my kind of central radar and a couple that are on my peripheral radar that I think are kind of important, right? That's a lot. And as John, you pointed out, it's a very heavy event season. I come into the latter part of August with both trepidation because I love summer. And then when we kind of get towards the U.S. holiday of Labor Day, everything kind of clicks into high gear, and off we go until we round out about the second week of December, where we all fall over and try to catch our breath as we head into the holidays. So what are those 4 events that I think about? So the ASUG family of events this fall are important. So we'll start with SAP for Utilities, which is specifically for the utilities industry and those practitioners. Always an amazing event. The utilities teams and the utilities industry operates differently than other industries. So that group gets together, and it's a tremendous community building event and opportunity. And it's co-produced by SAP and ASUG. It's a tremendous event if you're in the utility space. SAP, I will click out of the ASUG for a moment and go to the SAP side. So we also have on the SAP side, we have the SAP Connect, which is the line of business events, Success Connect, Spend Connect. I think if you're using those types of applications, that event is incredibly important, happening in Las Vegas. And then we click back in the oil and gas event. If you happen to be working in the oil and gas industries, ASUG is doing that down in Houston, Texas. And then we get to these 2 amazing events happening simultaneously, one in Berlin, one in Louisville, Kentucky. That is ASUG Tech Connect and SAP Tech Ed. They will be fused together this year. We will be doing live video from both. I'm super excited. That is about getting, to your point a few minutes ago, Josh and John, getting the enterprise architects together, as well as other technology players inside of the customer ecosystem, to talk about everything that they need to understand, and not a better place on the planet to do networking together to try to work through some of these fundamental challenges. And then the peripheral events. Microsoft does a fairly large event, which I think is important for those who are operating on an Azure platform. AWS does an important event for those operating on an AWS platform.
My
Did
first
I miss anyone?
You did not.
One.
Which one
What
did I
was
miss?
that? Oh, Josh, right? Yeah, Josh
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 Fest.
wants to call.
where is
ALM
Josh?
Because
event.
we have a global audience. We have a global.
Yeah. Let's do the global
So
event.
there's the
Burning Man?
Global. No, Cloud ALM Summit in Darmstadt. And
I did miss that one. My apologies to our
right.
our
And
German
I
European
want to
friends.
say that, it's interesting because my lineup, because I'm not going to the ASUG events, which I would love to go to, but that's another story. My
You're going
lineup
to
sort
Tech
of
Connect, aren't you?
hits very neatly this sort of triumvirate of topics and opportunities. I go to Connect, and there's this how do we get the line of business end to end process heterogeneity problem solved. Then I go to this Cloud ALM Summit and talk about what's happening on the project side of it. Is how do we build and maintain and operate these things using the Cloud ALM and the tool chain. And then I'm in Tech Connect, and to me that's sort of where it all comes together, where the practitioners show up and go, okay, now help us figure this stuff out. And we are, shameless plugging, we're doing a very interesting, John and I, session there on building business cases.
You're doing a phenomenal session on building business cases.
I want to get back to that one in a sec. I want to talk about the Connect event for a bit, because it was several years ago, Josh, that you wrote a blog post about why can't all the line of businesses inside of SAP have a converged event. At the time, I thought it was a howl in the wind, which I'm very familiar with because I do it all the time. So I know what howling feels like.
I thought it was Howl at the Moon. It's Howl at the Wind.
Howling at the Moon has purpose. Howling in the Wind is just sort of drifts off and
exactly. There was nothing there, but it was. He turned out to be Nostradamus, and now we have this very interesting event. And I think it's quite interesting because I'm going to SAP's main competitor events as well. Oracle's Cloud World, which I think may be redubbed AI World. I don't know. And then Workday Rising. So I'll be very interested to kind of get the competing perspectives. But then on Connect, you have SAP assembling line of business. And what's interesting about that is that I really wanted SAP to have this Success Connect event every year. If this structure works out, in North America as well as in EMEA, if this structure works out, that will happen. But in addition to Success Connect and Spend Connect, there's also supply chain for the first time. They're pulling in CX as well, which definitely needs to be there. And then you also have finance users there. I think if this event can achieve its potential, it really has a lot going for it for SAP, because now you legitimately have end-to-end process owners in the same room. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works now. I'm an event idealist, so I believe that events are broken and need total reinvention. And I have felt that way before the pandemic and still feel that way. So what I want to do is go in and stir the pot and get all those people talking to each other. And I realize that's probably not going to be what happens the first year, because they got to first get people there and get them on their tracks and get them that content they need. But what is exciting to me, Josh, is the realization of your blog post, which is, let's put these people in dialogue, particularly around their industry concerns, right? So get all the retail people from CX to supply chain to finance to spend, get them all in the same room. Like the same thing with oil and gas or whatever within the context of the line of business. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I think that we need these events, or we need people to come together more than ever, I think, because there's so much going on inside these technology ecosystems. The only way to make sense of it all, and the three of us are in the business of trying to make sense of it all, and sometimes my head just spins around, is to get out there and talk to your counterparts at various organizations and see if you can't figure out, how to kind of put something together. Because I think absent that, we're all kind of poking around in the dark. And, there's just, I keep hoping in my career as a technologist that this will get simpler one day. And I keep getting profoundly disappointed that it isn't actually getting simpler. It's actually getting more and more complicated.
Well, but it's also getting more and more functional. We're covering more bases. We're doing more things. We're you know, and we're doing it in the context of 20, 30, 40-year-old componentry.
Well, I guess we need technology more than ever, right, Josh? The world revolves around tech. And we need technology to help drive business processes or solve business processes or something. Right? I mean, long gone are the days of a 80 character by 25 row mainframe screen that could, allow you to enter invoices and get payments done.
Yeah.
I want to talk about
Which was that
I want to talk about Tech Connect for a sec, which, by the way, in case any listeners are in suspense, Josh is going to that event, even though he just said that
He just said he wasn't. I know. I was like,
wasn't
he's
going
not
to
going
any
to present.
ASUG event.
No, the ASUG. Oh, right. I'm not going
Yeah.
to the ASUG utilities.
But you are going to Tech Connect.
I'm going to
We'll get
definitely
back
get
to that.
And by the way, I know this doesn't play for our international audience, but ASUG will be doing 50 chapter meetings between now and year end. So if you are unable to attend any of the events we've been discussing here today, at least get out into your local community, a drive from your house or workplace, and attend a chapter meeting, because there's a whole lot of very important content being covered in those forums as well.
Yep. And if you're overseas, get with your regional peeps as well.
DSAG's doing, our DSAG folks, I'm sure I'll get a flaming email from them. Why don't you talk about, DSAG annual Congress coming up in a few weeks? Well, there's the plug for that.
There you go. Well done. So Josh, before we get to Tech Connect, can you just share, because you kind of did predict the need for this Connect line of business event. What do you think are the possibilities for this event?
Well, I think it really is a place where, part of the genesis of that idea was just sitting down with some really smart supply chain folks, time after time, and to a man and woman, they're saying to me, I'm a supply chain head, and I know my job, if I'm in direct procurement, what I do ends up with a product in the customer's hand. If I'm in indirect procurement, what I do ends up in an employee's hand. I know that's important. I need to know more about it, and I have no idea. I just know that that's what I need to be thinking about and tuning my supply chain to do. And that was sort of got me thinking, well, yeah, do you all ever talk to your your customer experience people? And these silos, look, enterprise software was sold in silos, and the customer community turned around and created buying centers that replicated that model. And to this day, what we have is this real dearth of conversation internally. It's kind of ironic that you have to sort of go to a conference to do that. But I think there's a real moment of clarity here that's possible when you walk into Supply Chain Connect, and there's a little arrow that says, and by the way, next stop on your end-to-end process is going to be over in Customer Experience Connect, and maybe you need to stop by Finance Connect as well, because the back end of this is really important as well. I think getting people thinking that way, and indeed actually understanding, hands-on, if you will, as well as in these peer-to-peer communications, what does it really mean to be sitting there waiting for your supply chain guys to get that damn product, onto the shop floor or onto the retail floor. That's I think those are going to be profound experiences for a lot of folks.
So with this business case thing, this is really fascinating, because I talked earlier in the podcast about how business leaders need to understand the technical architecture to deliver modern software and solve some of these problems. But the reverse is also true, that tech leaders need to understand how to talk the language of business. And
More
one
so
thing
than ever.
and one thing we saw at ASUG Tech Connect again and again, and Jeff, I know you heard this too. Josh and I heard it in our sessions last year, was in a variety of ways, senior SAP architects and leaders, tech leaders, were saying, we need help talking to the business, making the business case. Sometimes it was just the gap between enterprise architects and line of business. Other times they needed a more formal business case for certain projects. So as a result of that, Josh and I had this wacky idea of doing a session on that at the ASUG annual conference, and lo and behold, Jeff and Jeff's team said, let's give that a go. We ended up doing it. We got a really full crowd at that session. But Josh, I think I can speak for you here. I think you and I were both a little taken aback in the sense that we didn't feel like we had enough for these people. And this is a really, really big challenge at today's events, which is you don't just want to give people some information, you want to give them tools they can take back to their teams. And so I think we left that event saying, that was really cool, but we need to do more. And then we had a couple really interesting serendipitous encounters with different people, including someone from SAP. And so now, this has gathered momentum. Josh, do you want to pick up the story and explain?
Yeah, and basically, that's basically pun intended. So, there's one of the partners that's going to be helping us out is this company, Basis Technologies, and they've built they're building a really interesting AI tool that's featured in Thomas Saueressig's keynote at Sapphire, that really allows a customer to query a database of his successful projects and get a template, if you will, for the project that would work for them in their case, in their industry, and this is a product. This is a work in progress, so it's not fully formed today. You're not going to get that kind of response for every possible combination. But I went to the CPO and Georgia Apostolakis and said, well, could we adapt this a little bit to use in a workshop format where we can actually show how a demo system gets built from a business case standpoint. And this is my business need. And you start really with a fundamental question like, I've got to deal with my inventory turn problem because the world is so chaotic. What the hell am I going to do? And the idea in this workshop, we're going to show using this tool some small table teams. How does this work? And along the way, who do you need to bring in to answer this kind of question? Who do you need to include outside of your tech team, but also within your tech team to keep this project moving so that at the end of the day, you build the ideal kind of, you build the ideal environment to solve the business problem you have. And Basis is working with us on this. We've got some folks, should I tell them about the conversation we have with SAP as well?
Yeah.
So John and I are sitting at Sapphire waiting outside a room to speak to Thomas Saueressig, and one of the senior delivery people from SAP, Todd Crandall, walks by, and I know Todd, we're chatting, and he's because guys, my real problem is I'm struggling to build really solid business cases for my customers. And after we're done high-fiving, we said, hey, how'd you like to be part of this idea? So we started building momentum around it. We got Mr. Scott involved as well. He thinks it's a good idea. And we're now promising a hell of a lot. We better be able to deliver. But
you guys better deliver.
Yeah. But the idea is you're going to not just see this workshop.
No pressure, Josh.
Thank you. living dangerously. That's my motto here. But we, the goal really is to not just showcase how this thought process works, but to give attendees some tools to take back to the home office and say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. And here's kind of how this needs to go in our company in order to get this kind of desired outcome.
This ties back to one of a fundamental thing we were talking about earlier, in my view, Josh. I apologize, John.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That if the technology teams are responsible for continually keeping the lights on, they don't have the time necessary to go out and spend it with their business counterparts to speak in a language that the business counterparts understand versus speaking in a language you understand. I think the foundational challenge of these business cases is getting them to talk and articulate about business value in a way that other executives can kind of connect to very easily. And that, to me, is the gift that both of you are going to bring to that session in Louisville. Is how do I, as a technology practitioner, articulate a plan and a position that lets others in my organization go, oh my God, yes, that makes sense. We need to fund that, because if we do, we will get these other incremental outcomes. And I think that's the incredibly important part of it, because unfortunately, what IT has been, what the business views through IT is that this is where projects go to generate a lot of money and a lot of delay. And as technology practitioners, we need to unwind that and use all the tools at our disposal to demonstrate to our business counterparts that we are there with them every single step of the way to deliver business performance.
So just real quick on this session,
no pressure, boys.
The thing that I will say is, obviously this is a work in progress. I think it's going to be a successful session, but I think if we build momentum on this, it will get better and better thanks to the feedback of all the customers that are coming and stuff. But the thing I'm encouraged about is this time we'll have the key players in the same room. Josh, you talked about the importance of having cool partners. Well, we're going to have a cool partner to give people a flavor for what working with a partner on this looks like. We'll have user group leadership in the room. We'll have SAP in the room. We'll have industry specific tools in the room. Like that, to me, is a major step forward in terms of getting all the parties in the same place. And then we'll figure out what we can get out of it. The thing I will say to you, if you're listening to this and saying, I can't make it to Louisville. If you can make it, I hope you'll join this session and be part of this process with us. But if you cannot, rest assured that we'll be able to boil down these lessons. That's the beauty of this, is that we will boil this down for you and bring this back to you, even if you can't make it. But if you can make it, we'd love to have you on the ground to help sort of forge this.
John, I think what you said is critically important, that the heart of this dialogue, the heart of this conversation is working with your peers to understand what might work inside their organizations and how do you craft that to work inside yours. So I know that both of you will bring amazing tools and techniques to the table, but ultimately this has to be delivered in the vernacular and the vocabulary and the energy that your organization necessitates to fuse idea with dollars to make it happen. And almost every organization approaches that slightly differently. So where do you grab a hold of that nuance and that passion to deliver something that makes sense for your enterprise? And I think, again, that only comes through collaboration and listening to how others have gotten to success.
And those are the most important people in the room, by the way.
Yeah.
You're going to have the customers, and they're going to, hopefully they're rolling up their sleeves and getting involved, because that's...
And saying, here's what I know works, and here's what I tried and it didn't, and why I don't think it did, because that didn't land on the business outcome side.
Yep.
Back in the day, I was a really courageous financial consultant by the name of John Jordan, who still holds an SAP Financials event in San Diego most years. He gave me the keys to the car and let me run SAP events on a small scale. God knows why. And I didn't actually run the whole thing, but he let me create programs. I created an unconference program that put a bunch of financial professionals in the room with just a whiteboard and no structure. And that was really exciting for me, because if I'm going to preach, that we need to reinvent events, I need to be able to prove that we can do this. And it ended up being absolutely fantastic. But the one thing I learned again and again is that just what you said, Geoff, it's all about the peers and getting them talking, but there are times where in the course of the conversation, they want access to resources and answers to questions that as a peer group, they don't have. And so the goal of a program like this is to make sure that there are people in the room that can provide that context. And so, for example, from SAP, what do peers want in that room? They want answers to roadmap questions. They want answers to how other customers have done that. What they don't want is a sales pitch from SAP, right? And so part of the goal of that is to assemble resources and experts, but everyone understands their place, which is the peers are going to go at it, and then we're going to try to help support them with whatever resources they might need. And so let's see how it goes. I mean, we're all going to learn this together. So
right. I think to your point, Jon, right, the idea of a roadmap is interesting, but the roadmap assumes that the business case and the reason for it have been assembled, right? And
yes,
but what if you don't have that business case? Well, the roadmap might turn on some other ideas, but at the end of the day, how are you going to talk about this in a language that your fellow team members inside your organization will understand and willing to walk with you down that path to make that vision a reality? Right? That to me is the essence of this. And it's your ability as an IT professional to be able to take those first steps and not wait for someone else to take them on your behalf, right? So here's how I think we can take this amazing asset we call SAP and move it into the future or do these things with it that allow us to achieve these other business outcomes. Will you please come on that journey with me? That's where it starts.
Right. And hopefully in the process of the conversation, they'll say, yeah, I was at this Tech Connect place and I was talking to so-and-so and they work for this company that is not identical to us, but they had this experience. And it allows them to say, it's, honestly, let's be honest, it's better than Jon, Josh, or Geoff said. It's my peer said, and my peer
I know this, and I know this will work because here's some other folks who have done it that I know that I've met, and I know that they can do it, so can we. I think one of the magic of a business case as a CEO who's listening to business cases pitched by my team all the time, what's the magic? That you believe in it when you pitch it to me, right? If you believe and you can demonstrate to me that you're actually going to deliver that outcome, that is a huge amount of distance that's been traveled. If you come up and say, well, yeah, our SAP instance, it's 15 years old and it's just got to be replaced and it's going to cost X millions of dollars. Sign here. There's no energy in that. There's no excitement in that. That's not going to promote me or motivate me as the CEO to go, well, okay, I guess let's do it. I'm going to want to listen that you can actually deliver it.
That was probably the most important thing you said today, if I may say so.
I finally got a compliment from you after all these podcasts that we've done together. Normally, you just sit there and ridicule me.
Yeah. No, seriously.
Now my day's been made. I got my Josh Greenbaum shout out today.
Yeah, we can close it down.
Still my heart.
Well, we do need to close it down in just a couple minutes. So good job getting everyone's needs met at the end here. I will say in this week's roundup of enterprise hits and misses that I do every week, I cited a CIO use case from the CIO of Harvard. Josh, I'm not going to name the publication because it'll push your buttons, but I'll read the quote, which is, "This reality reflects the shift in IT." It's about the so-called octopus CIO, which was really about service management early in my career and is now more about strategic co-leadership with business partners. So that is the broader shift in which the context of this type of program that we're trying to develop here is happening. And thanks, Geoff, for taking a chance on a couple of wild and wacky dudes like Jon, and Josh, and it should be interesting. So we didn't touch on SAP's acquisition of Smart Recruiters. I've written about that. I know that ASUG has too. I don't want to get buried in that now, but I will say that there are trends around. While I was critical of suites earlier in the conversation, there's definitely a trend around getting all of your HCM from one place or getting all of your CX from one place or things like that. There's trends around consolidating within certain areas. And also there's a whole lot of buying like quote AI enabled companies by larger companies that are trying to infuse their products with modern features and modern business processes. And you can look at it from that perspective when it comes to recruiting. So that's your quick soundbite on that. If you want more on that, like I said, check our websites. So we're out of time, but guys,
Thank you.
If you were a customer heading to these fall events, and you also need to bring back some quality stuff for your team back home that doesn't have the chance to go, maybe for budget reasons, or maybe they just have other project deadlines. What's your advice to customers in terms of getting the most out of this, but bringing something back to your team?
Ears open, right? First and foremost, ears open. Get out there and yes, attend sessions, but more importantly, talk to a few people you've never met before and try to assess how they're approaching this ecosystem, how they're solving these challenges. And you won't hear any one piece of information that will, answer everything for you, but you'll be able to assemble various different puzzle pieces that will help you and your teams along that journey and that path. But it does not happen if you don't ask questions and if you don't meet people that you don't know.
And I will echo a similar idea. I mean, if you're in utilities world or oil and gas, you've got a particular show here in North America you can go to that really focuses that. But any event, online or not, well, particularly in-person events, you will in any of the events we've talked to, you will find different sessions specific to your industry, that specific to your business problem. Go perhaps to take notes, but particularly go to talk to the folks as they stream in and out. And that's setting up your event calendar with back-to-back sessions and no free time isn't going to work. Frankly, I have a friend who's a university dean here, and she said her best advice she figured out was to don't go to the meeting, go to the after hour, coffee hour afterwards and get the real story, because the meeting itself may or may not be that useful. I think the same thing. The session may or may not be useful. Hopefully they are. But boy, what you're going to get afterwards.
It's the starting point, right, Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, nothing beats the ability after an event to be able to contact some people and just continue to debrief, right? Like, because when SAP puts out a press release, who are, some of the first people I was like, what the hell just happened? It'll be you guys, right? Because we have the relationships that we built up and worked really hard on. Work on those, right? Because foster those and work on those, because learning is now continuous, and you're not going to even the stuff you learn at an event, some of it might be out of date in 3 or 6 months, not all of it, but some,
maybe 3 weeks.
But the relationships but the relationships that you have formed around that. So I totally agree. Put in the time, try to have a little fun with it, but there's a real reason why people stay out late at these events and struggle with waking up in the morning. And I'm one of those people too, because the good stuff happens after hours. Sorry.
Looking forward to seeing both of you out there.
I know what's going to happen, right?
Like, Louisville, man. We're going to conquer Louisville.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Anyhow, we'll probably do this one more time in the lead up to that. But in the meantime, guys, Godspeed to your events and looking forward to the debriefs later.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us on board.
Yep.